Good afternoon, or I assume for some of you it might be good morning. Thanks for joining us. I'm real excited for the next 45 minutes to talk about some work that we've been doing here at NACFE along with Electrada. And we have a guest, Scott Brower from Penske, that's going to join in as well. So if you don't know a whole lot about NACFE, I just invite you to join our newsletter list, spend some time on nacfe.org. We really don't have memberships, so we appreciate all of the interest in our work and really believe that we're doing some work in the not only electric truck space, but really all technologies and all actions that fleets and others are taking to decarbonizing moving freight around North America. So, welcome. Yeah, and if you're a longtime friend of us, great to have you. If you're new, also nice to have you. So, uh, what I will do and what we will do is talk a bit about kind of this broad new subject of charging as a service, or having your electric trucks be supported by uh, another organization or somebody else helping to provide that service of charging your trucks. That can take many different shapes, as we'll talk about. I mean, it can be in the form of, say, like a electric truck stop, to use a kind of a I don't know if that's a crude term, but one that might make sense, all the way back to commissioning or working with another company to put that charging actually on your property if you're a fleet depot, and have them both own, operate, maintain the charging service for you on site. So it can take different shapes, and that's really what we were trying to uncover with this effort here. So let me move on and get going. What we will be doing here is talk about the charging as a service in general, and then we'll get into some specifics about what we found in a analysis and a report that we did. So we'll move right in, and I want to start with Scott Brower at Penske. So Scott, just tell us a little bit about how you view charging as a service as you're beginning to start deploy these trucks across North America in some of your locations.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me. Can you hear me, Mike?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, great. Okay. So, yeah, hi, everyone. Nice to spend a few minutes with you. And my name's Scott Brower. I've been with Penske over 35 years. Most recently, I've been in a role where I lead our vehicle supply team in regards to all new technology. Um, so it's been an exciting role here the last couple of years. But for many of you that don't know who Penske is, we have a lot of equipment throughout the North American transportation industry, and we are operating many electric vehicles today throughout North America, anywhere from light duty trucks up to heavy duty tractors. And really, our adventure started back in, I think, 2017, when we did a co-creation with Daimler Truck, where those electric trucks are more hand built. So we've come a long way. Now we're here to 2025, and we have a lot of customers that lease vehicles from us that come to our team and ask for guidance and support on alternative vehicles, their transition to zero emissions, technology solutions that can help them. And then we have a Penske Energy group business that helps with any charging and infrastructure support questions, which I know they work a lot with Electrada. So, how do I feel, right, about charging as a service? Infrastructure and access to charging, in my opinion, remains a challenge, and along with coming up with an acceptable TCO for electric vehicles. So yeah, we understand the concept of charging as a service. Um, Today, I think there's still a lot of open questions that I'm sure will get answered as this webinar goes on, some of them. But I think the industry needs more scale, and I think we need more time for charging as a service to grow into our operations. Um, we need more electric vehicles to help scale. and we need more infrastructure availability, and then that's going to help to start create that better TCO. So I can speak as the leader.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Scott. I lost you there for a little bit. I don't know if the audience has, but uh, I think what we're seeing is some growth, and we've been able to deploy some trucks out there. But to be able to really understand these different options, to your point, we're going to need some scale. Uh, what do you see as the difference between in your decision making as to whether you buy and purchase the chargers yourself or whether you look for somebody else to help you with that? What are the key considerations there?
Hey, Mike, just hopping in here. I think we may have lost Scott. So I'm going to connect with him and try to get him back in.
All right. Well, then let's move on and hear from Ryan talking a little bit. I think just to reiterate what I think I heard from Scott is that these like I just said, we there will be multiple options to get electric vehicles charged, and some of those are maturing a little faster, and some of them are really maybe just ideas with not a lot of support out there. But this whole charging piece is critical to TCO. I remember the first few electric trucks and depots I went to. It was just kind of like, let's get these chargers in the ground and just charge trucks, and don't worry about this other stuff like managed charging and who owns them and maintenance and those things. But I was pretty naive back in the day. So, Ryan, tell us a little bit about the work at Electrada, and then we'll get into the cooperative work we did on the survey analysis and report with Yunsu here in a minute. Ryan?
Yeah, thanks very much, Mike, and good morning or afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. We were really excited to be able to collaborate with NACFE on this particular report. We know that there's a lot of value that can be gained from combining kind of practical intelligence to fleet operators thinking about transition to EVs, and where we can see real operational intel from the 100 plus depots that we operate with our fleet customers with NACFE's kind of robust industry analysis. So we're really hoping that this report has the ability to kind of simplify and accelerate the path to fleet electrification at scale. And we're really excited to kind of dig into a lot of these different results. So really quickly, as top line context on Electrada, Electrada is an electric fuel provider serving North America. We are based in Cincinnati. As I mentioned before, we have more than 100 commercial grade depots. We work with public transit, private commercial, city, muni, school district, all kinds of mid-sized to large-scale fleets and across all makes and models and all classes of vehicles. So we've got everything from pickup trucks to cargo vans to box trucks to cutaways and shuttle buses to tractor trailers and public transit buses across our sites. And that's translated to some really neat impacts in terms of carbon emissions reductions. On an annualized basis, we're doing nearly 7 million clean miles driven. So we've had the great opportunity to work with a lot of great organizations across this industry, really important players across both OEMs and FMCs. We've really enjoyed having the chance to collaborate with Penske over these last several years, and with large scale customer fleets, like Red Bull and Ferguson and Comcast and some unis and institutions too. We're also we're part of BlackRock's Climate Infrastructure Fund, which helps us to scale our charging as a service across North America. So what does it really mean to be working in charging as a service, and how do we think about what's our philosophy as we think about the way to get fleets to scale across North America? For us, there is no such thing as fleet electrification or successful fleet electrification programs if there's no reliability and ROI. As I think Mike mentioned, fleet electrification should be, from our perspective, an absolute business case and technology case first. We need to ensure that the fuel is as reliable as the liquid fuel that fleets are comfortable and have been using for the last 70 years. We need to ensure that there absolutely is a business case that support this from the top down and bottom up, and that these two things, reliability and ROI together, kind of beget sustainability. And while this is kind of our vision for how we think this industry needs to operate, we also know that this is a really complex challenge that many fleets have been kind of had foisted upon them to try and integrate in terms of new technology. We experience everything from process related challenges, technology related challenges, financing related challenges. A lot of fleets have to figure out what are the right permitting to manage, how do I get the right tariff for my site, what hardware and software should I implement, how do I ensure that the hardware and software I use are fully interoperable with all the makes and models of a lot of different vehicles that I implement in my fleet. And how do I then finance this? Am I going to do this internally? Am I going to set aside CapEx for this? Am I going to work with an external provider like Electrada or others? How am I going to engage the utilities? And how do I do this without it taking 2 or 3 years? And that really kind of this summation of hardcore challenges is the real reason why Electrada exists and why I think a lot of other charging as a service providers in this industry exist, which is to try and help us take this technology to scale in the most cost efficient way and alleviating concepts which are not core to any of these business
Yeah.
moving forward.
Yeah. So when I describe a sort of the mix, Ryan, of charging as a service from completely independent, maybe highway or corridor charging, back to maybe more city or close to the terminals or depots charging, to actually even then on site at a customer's location. Does that accurately describe what you're seeing as the options that truck fleets might consider, or do I have it putzed up there, Ryan?
I think you're on the money, Mike. Ultimately, there are use cases for every fleet, and all of those different types of use cases that you mentioned are really important. We're going to need charging solutions on the highway. We're going to need the kind of e-hubs that centralize many different fleets in one place, and we're going to need the at depot-based solutions like ours. Everything we do is kind of private, commercial, behind the fence depot charging, design through build and operate. And whether that means that you've got existing charging infrastructure that you kind of need to have bought out and outsourced to someone else and get some capital back and run that, or you're trying to build new things, there's a lot of different solutions out there to help you reach that kind of scale. But yeah, I think that's a really good way to frame this out.
Yeah, and I do think as we emerge, all this is so nascent and new, and so one of the issues that we actually see is that many of us call these things different things, right? I mean, so e-hubs and depots and all that. So over time, I think we'll come up with a more common language that would really help us here. So I'm going to turn to Yunsu Park and actually now what we did here and what we're talking about. So about a month ago, we published a report. It's on NACFE's report page. We called it a collaboration report because we worked with Electrada and we collaborated really with the whole industry to do this work. So it's a collaboration report on NACFE.org. I also believe it's on Electrada's site, and we both did some social media and a news bulletin, and I think we put it in NACFE's newsletter about a month ago. So here we are talking about it, and would love to hear from you, anybody on this webinar, or really anybody out there, about what we found and kind of dig deeper into. Challenge us on some things or tell us what you believe we got right. But pull in Yunsu. And Yunsu, why don't you take us through how we looked at this all the way through the findings of the report, and just give us a little inside baseball, Yunsu, on how the two teams of Electrada and NACFE did this work along with the survey efforts that we did.
Yes, hi. So thank you, Mike. I'm Yunsu Park. I'm the Director of Engineering for NACFE. And I was part of the team that worked with Electrada. I was part of the NACFE team that worked with Electrada to put this survey together. So we wanted to see where the industry, or how the industry thinks about charging as a service, but just in generally about the challenge of creating infrastructure around electric trucks. And so we created a survey to really try to hear broadly from the industry, not just the fleets, but everyone really involved, all the way from the suppliers and the consultants and everyone through the industry, to try to really understand where the challenges are today. So we, as I said, we worked together with Electrada. We created a survey, and then we sent it, we sent the request out for participants through our various channels, NACFE as well as Electrada, and and we feel very good. We got 175 respondents. As you can see, about just over a fifth of them ended up being fleets, and then you can see it kind of break down in the chart here in the pie chart. Another fifth or maybe were either hardware or software suppliers, and then consultants was the other large group, and then a whole bunch of other industry participants. So we got really good broad participation. And when you look at the fleet specifically, most of the respondents were large fleets. So we said large is anyone with really operating over 100 trucks, which of course is a pretty big range. And there's a pretty near even split amongst the duty cycles we asked fleets whether they're local, regional, or long haul, and we had an almost nearly 33% split amongst those. One thing that we did see is that of the people that responded, they were generally pretty well experienced with electrification. So 2/3 of the respondents said they had implemented or are in the process of implementing an electrification project. And 25%, so 1 in 4, even said they had actually implemented our electrification at more than one location. So in general, probably a much more experienced group than maybe the industry as a whole. And then, so when we did the analysis, we really focused on what did the fleets say, and then what did the rest of the industry say. So whenever you look at, if you look in the report, you can see very much that we break it down between the two. And so when we did that, we came up with really 3 findings that we looked at amongst, how the fleet sees it and how the industry sees it. And some of the ones obviously are not big surprises. I think the biggest one is that, electrification or working with utilities, both the fleet said and as well as the industry in general said that working with utilities still remains one of the biggest challenges. And that's consistent with what you hear generally. It's consistent what we learned with Run on Less and Run on Less Electric Depot. And so it's something that we know is a challenge, and frankly, it's part of the reason we did this survey. Another finding we found, or another finding that we had, is that when you look at both fleets and industry, the number one thing that the fleets say is important to them is actually operational effectiveness. I think TCO is actually not far behind, but really what the fleets care about more than anything else is making sure that their operations are not impacted negatively when they do electrification projects. And so fortunately we see that in the data, and it's fortunately one of the things that services such as CaaS can help with. And then the final finding that we ended up with is, excuse me, sorry. The final finding we ended up with, I am so sorry, I have lost my screen.
Well, yeah, and so we're talking about what's the definition of success for each of the how do they define success? Is that what you're alluding to?
That's right. Yes, I'm so sorry. Something's happened with my connection here, so I'm a little bit blind at the moment. But
we can still hear, we can still see and hear you.
I think the last one is that the benefits of working with a CaaS or with a third party is that working with getting help with the charging infrastructure and implementation are some of the main benefits that fleets find when they work with a third party such as a CaaS.
Yeah, so maybe I think we have Scott back, and so Scott, if you could share, I think there's a lot of things in managing fleets and managing our businesses that become new to us, and they're difficult, and they need a lot of different inputs and help. And so early on, it's not surprising that we need others to help us. And so, but long term, then likely some of those will become better known, and we'll learn how to manage it. And quite possibly will take more of those things in-house. So sort of like here with electric truck, it doesn't surprise me that maybe for the next 5 or so years, fleets will be looking for help in this effort, because it takes facilities and financing and work with utility and managing the energy for the trucks and so forth. And then as we scale and learn more and more, some of those activities and management practices might be taken in house. But I don't know. How does that fit with your thinking around all of this, Scott?
Yeah. Can you hear me, Mike? Yep.
Yes, we can hear you
Okay.
fine.
Yeah, cool. I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. And, adopting new technology into your fleet, I mean, there's so much you have to think about. And from operation, and you think about an electric truck and how, just even plugging the charger up to it to see if if the battery is charging effectively, it's very different versus driving up to a gas pump or a diesel pump, and there's fuel going into the vehicle, so it's just a different experience. Operationally, we work with our customers every day to do orientation. We've developed some virtual orientation, but then some customers prefer in person. I find that once you go through the vehicle once, and the driver and operator gets a little more familiar with it, they learn the regen process. They're like, okay, I can figure this out. It's pretty much like a regular truck. But however, then you get into the part about maintaining the vehicle. Um, and the example I thought of, Mike, when you were talking about that, yeah, we needed a lot of help with technical training. Um, and there's still at times where, hey, if it's going to be high voltage that needs to be looked at, then we really have special technicians to handle work like that, or we go back to the OEM that manufactured the vehicle. So I hope that answers your question. But yeah, it's a journey. We have to,
Yep.
all work on together.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, and the other thing that we have right now is, and we think it's going to get better. We expect it to get better, but somewhat limited range for these electric trucks. So, being able to charge them out in the wild, whether that's at a e-hub like Ryan was addressing, or something like that, is important. It's important to that operations. And as we move up into charger speeds from say 150 to 350, 360, 6 or 700, or wherever we go, ultimately maybe to megawatt charging, then the faster charging capabilities at these charging sites will allow then the truck to get a lot more energy quicker, and be able to be more practical when they're out charging, so the driver's not staying around and so forth. So I'm going to turn to Ryan now. Ryan, as you guys at Electrada are in the weeds on a lot of this, what in this particular project was interesting, or maybe even surprising to Electrada once we got all this survey data in and you started analyzing it along with NACFE, and then actually writing the report? Are there a couple of things that you at Electrada really found interesting?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Appreciate you jumping into the weeds on this too. I think that there's a couple of different things that stood out from the presentation that I found quite interesting. Some of it aligned with our experience to date, some of it didn't. So, as you can see on this page here, as we think about barriers to fleet electrification, there was a hardcore association with TCO and ROI and vehicle range. Now, while that's inherently probably not totally surprising, because we know that range, particularly in heavy duty, is a persistent challenge for the industry. We know that there is a persistent price differential in a lot of the different electric models in comparison to their diesel or gasoline peers. I think that taking this to a real economics basis and bringing it front of mind for folks is progressed more than we perhaps anticipated. So the fact that TCO and ROI is kind of up there as both some of the biggest challenges and also some of the kind of highest priorities and metric areas for a lot of these fleets was quite interesting to see. I think that there's been, within the fleet application and commercial grade or commercial scale EV deployments, there's been a little bit of a evolutionary journey, right? So a lot of fleets started off with pilots, and a lot of the pilots were, let's build it to make sure it can charge whenever we want, whatever we want, and it's got to be big, and it's going to be a great, demonstration of technology, and then we'll go from there. Well, a lot of those pilots ended up probably having maybe a little bit of additional spend on infrastructure, maybe not maximizing efficiency of spend on time of day charging and managed electricity. And so that, we've seen that that's kind of left a bit of a sour taste in a lot of our customers' mouths, at least in the initial stages of their journeys, because the ROI isn't there, right? It's if you're spending a lot of on, perhaps overspending on infrastructure and perhaps overspending on electricity at the beginning of the journey, then you might think, well, EVs aren't really for me. And so as we have kind of passed through the last 3, 4, 5 years, I think we've seen a more and more interest in exploring what it looks like to really maximize the hardcore focus on CapEx spend on that infrastructure, how to work and outsource some of that, non-core competencies to additional suppliers, just like they've been doing with liquid fuel for the last 70 years plus, and just kind of seeing how that has become and moved to be higher in front of mind for a lot of these fleet and industry participants was a really cool thing to see.
Yeah, and so I'm going to leave it on this slide for a minute. We've done this before where we've done surveys at NACFE and we've separated fleets from everybody else. And it's actually, I kind of find that pretty interesting. And so I want to turn to Yunsu for a thought here on this. To be a successful supporter of the end users, the fleets, whether you're a supplier of the trucks or of the battery packs or of chargers, or even a finance organization, an NGO, a regulator, or anybody that's sort of helping the fleets with this change to electric trucks, to do that well, we always encourage, and they do it anyway. Think as if you're the fleet, right? I mean, it's the classic business school education of, put yourself in your customers' views. What do they need? And then provide services and products that meet their needs. So to do that, you got to walk in the shoes of the customer. And, we always suggest go and see the customer and understand what their challenges are, what's the benefits, to make sure we keep providing those benefits. So Yunsu, when you dug into the detail, and you and I go way back, so I know you dug into the detail here, the fleet's responses and what we call in the industry, or all of their support responses, were pretty well aligned here, which is in my mind a good thing, because it means they're seeing the problem in the same way. And in a really early chaotic state, it may not be that case. It may be that the fleets and their supporters or the industry have very different thoughts in their minds. Now, at least, I think they're coalesced. And is that in your mind, Yunsu, a good thing that will help us then solve some of these challenges, because they're pretty much aligned? Does that logic make sense? And is that what you saw here?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that I really found interesting in this survey and as part of doing this work. And Mike, if you don't mind jumping over to the slide that shows the what fleet, the one with the bar charts, the blue and the orange next to each other. The other one. What I really like about this chart is that the two really, so we, again, like I said before, we analyze fleet responses and then put them next to the industry respondents. So even though there were more people in the industry side, we valued them, we kind of put them next to each other on this chart exactly. And what I really find interesting here, again, is that we already talked about, the fleets, of course, answer how they see it. And then the industry answers it, just like you said, Mike. The industry kind of answers it what they think they hear from the fleets, right? And the fact that they see a lot of things that are aligned, pretty, that the bars pretty much move together up and down for every single, aspect of the definition of success that we asked about here. And that, that really tells me that the industry one is pretty well connected to what the fleets are seeing. And I think it also should mean that the industry is out there looking at where are the pain points and how can we as an industry address those, right? I mean, clearly it's a profit motive, but that's where the money flows, that's where the thinking flows, and that's kind of where the effort flows. So I think that's really good, and it's really good to see. There's really two questions that I found interesting on this chart where there is a little bit of difference. TCO, fleet said, was of course important. It was probably the second most important thing behind operational effectiveness. But there's clearly, from a fleet standpoint, operational effectiveness was clearly the most important thing. The industry, answering again to what they think the fleets believe, put TCO pretty much equal with operational effectiveness, right? I mean, they're still strong, strong saying these are important and very important, but clearly maybe what the fleets say from a TCO standpoint maybe isn't quite what they feel. And then same thing on emissions reductions. It's the flip side there. Fleets maybe don't quite say this is as much valuable as what the industry believes.
Yeah, and I think surveys are always challenging, right? I mean, how you exactly ask the question as well as what the answers are. But yeah, I do. When I first reviewed the data and the thinking and so forth, this is one of the things that just popped out at me, that the responses were similar and that was a good thing in our evolution going forward. So one final thing before we go to questions from the audience, but Scott, I know you've been through the report, even though you weren't active with the data analysis and so forth. But what strikes you in what we found here in the conversation so far here in this webinar that maybe others should be thinking about and given your experience?
Well, yeah, I did read through the report. I thought it was very well done. So yeah, great job to everyone that was involved. And it's that chicken or the egg, right? And it's just like, is the charging going to come to bring on the units, the vehicles, or are the vehicles going to come to bring on the charging? And I really think we need more charging infrastructure. And I think that this is just one more solution for our customers that really connected with, it gives you the ability to put all that capital cost of with the CaaS provider, right? And just like people do with their regular fuel today. So that's what I took away from it, and it takes the operational part of it out of it, and they can just focus on enjoying the vehicle and delivering their products. So
yeah, there's some, fleets have been choosing whether to fuel their diesel trucks on site or go to fueling stations off site for decades and decades, probably as long as we had diesel fuel, right? So in some ways, some of this isn't all that new. I mean, I've been in the industry a while, and sometimes I challenge myself. Okay, well, is this really that different from what we've been operating? Because we sometimes we think these challenges are bigger than they are, but this is much as you mentioned earlier. This is different than putting a hose in and letting it fuel, and the cost of the diesel stays the same all the time. It may change week to week, but it doesn't change hour to hour like electricity can. You also have the time aspect of slower charging. I recall natural gas where you can make a decision to fast fill natural gas if you need that truck back out on the road quickly, or you can slow fill it which a lot of garbage trucks do, because a garbage truck's come back to the yard like at 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and they don't need to go back out until 4 in the morning, so they can sit there and slow fill with natural gas, much the same that we're experiencing with this electrification, where if the truck's coming back to the depot, and it can sit along the fence and slow charge all night and get the charge it needs, or maybe you need to do a fast charge. But I think this term charging as a service is pretty broad, and I also learned that with this work of whether it can be across the board or out on the highway, at hubs, or at the site. We have a couple questions from the audience. One, Ryan. Ryan, what do you see as the biggest driver for a fleet to choose to hire somebody else to operate and manage chargers on their site. So I guess they're probably thinking about, is it them considering whether they're going to buy it and do all the execution and implementation themselves on property, or hire somebody else? What's going through a fleet's mind when they make that decision, Ryan?
It's a great question. So thanks for that. I think there's two big components to that. The first one is the use case itself. I think nearly 86% of all the commercial trucks on the road in the U.S. today go out, run around, and come back to base. So that's kind of depot-based operations where they have a core facility that they're leaving from, delivering on routes for, and coming back with a significant dwell time, usually overnight or different stages of the day. So naturally, that in that kind of big chunk of use cases, there's a lot of folks who would probably it would make sense to be charging on site at their location because the truck's gonna be there anyway, so you might as well take advantage of that downtime to be able to manage the fueling on electric vehicles. And then I think as to why work with an external provider instead of trying to kind of continue to scale the capabilities in-house to put together this type of charging infrastructure, it's all about shifting risk, shifting operational risk, shifting human capital risk, shifting financial risk. So if you work with a charging as a service provider that is managing all the upfront capitalization of the infrastructure, that has some, uptime guarantees in place, or like 99% uptime, or whatever that may be, they have a long-term contract that they're on the hook for, then you're allowing yourself to have a potentially and most likely higher return on invested capital for those dollars, right? You can reinvest that in the core operation of the business instead of having to delve into an ancillary service that fleets haven't been in the business of managing and creating and delivering energy for a long time. And then you can also think about, how do I then utilize my own internal human resources capabilities, right? So instead of having your own folks managing the maintenance and trying to keep the uptime there, and being on there to plug and unplug and all these other things, how can you outsource that such that you can devote those resources, their time, their energy, and the costs associated with them to other core components of the business? And thirdly, what makes the most sense for the business in terms of operations, right? How do we know that we're going to be able to get our product or our people moving as quickly and as efficiently as possible without having to try and learn this whole great new task of how to design a depot and how to build it and how to work with utility and how to run it and how to manage the uptime? So it's I think at the end of the day, it's all about shifting risk. That's, I think, why we exist and why a lot of charging as a service, opportunities have gained a lot of traction, momentum in the industry over the last several years.
Yeah, and I think it's as we talked a little earlier, I think it's super important in the really early stages here because fleets, even large fleets like a Penske, they have lots of sites they're going to be doing, but however fast they go and the scale that companies like yours and others who are doing lots of these deployments around, you can learn faster and get us up that curve quicker. And I don't know if later on, as the industry starts maturing more, that maybe this will the dynamics of that'll change. But we're very far away from that. Here's another question about like small fleets. So somebody with 2, 3, 4, 5 trucks, and we're starting to see that some of these smaller fleets are being asked to electrify by some customers, that really are into sustainability and want to move fast, or maybe they just have a contractor model, those shippers and larger fleets to smaller companies. And they may bring their van or truck, even pickup trucks or medium trucks. They may bring them back to home base, but that home base might be a house or a very small business without the capabilities of putting charging in, or even hiring somebody to do charging as a service at their site. So, Scott, at Penske, I always call you guys the fleet of fleets. I don't know if that's an internal term you taught me or something else, but you work with a lot of small fleets. So what's your thought about a small business who wants to go fast with electrifying their vehicles with respect to charging? I mean, do they have to wait for these e-hubs to evolve, or will you help them with that somehow, or just how do you see that working with small fleets?
Yeah, great question. And, it really comes down to what their operation can support and do they want to put the infrastructure and investment in their own property. We find we are the fleet of fleets, actually. I think I taught you that, Mike, because we just have so many different customers, at least from us, that we can then aggregate all that information up under one big fleet. But back to what I was saying, some people, they rent their property or lease their property, and then they have a landlord that doesn't want them to approve to put in infrastructure. So you have to first understand all those dynamics. And then is it something you want to make an investment for 3 to 4 units where, hey, if there is a charging depot that's right down the street and you can just go there, depending on the speed of charge and the ability to keep your vehicle there. So there's a lot that goes into it. That I'm probably not answering your question, but yes, we're working. I said earlier, if you all heard that part of it, we're working on a lot of smaller projects right now with small charging installs versus these large projects.
Yeah, I think what I heard you say, and as I think about this too, I mean, I think here we are in the early stages, and the dynamics are going to change a lot. It very well could be. I mean, we've seen open house announcements by Green Lane and Terawatt, and I shouldn't name them because I'm going to miss some, but a lot of these organizations putting up, public truck charging with various different. Some of them are drive through, some of them are pull in, some of them are fast charging, slow charging. There's lots of different. There's a lot of different solutions out there, but to your point, it could be that you're thinking about electric trucks, but you're like, I don't know how I'm going to get them charged. And then there might be a charging hub, one of these e-hubs Ryan mentioned, just start near you, and then all of a sudden it changes the whole dynamics of whether that small fleet or even larger fleets should think about it. We were talking to a fleet the other day, and one of these charging hubs that I'm talking about, all of a sudden gave their routes the routes that they could electrify a whole different meaning because they could get to that charging location at maybe 40% state of charge, get it up to 70 or 80%, and get a big range extension on the electric trucks they were already operating. So, that's kind of what I heard you say. Last question, and I'm going to let anybody, and then we've got to get going. But this was an interesting question that was sent to me, and that is this survey was done, I think, like October, November, if I have it right. Maybe Ryan or Yancy, you can correct me, but people talk about the situation around electrification, electric trucks today being very different from a year ago. We have administration changes that are affecting infrastructure spending by the government, as well as maybe incentives on the trucks. We've got, a review of regulations and so forth. So I guess my question is, and I pulled up this slide here about the barriers and challenges. Would anybody, any of the three of you want to share, what might be different as we go into this next phase of electrification with those dynamics I just mentioned? Would that change any of these in your mind, or were they different on the survey, or just we're given where we were a while back and where we're headed in the next 6 months to a year or so forth? Anything look different, or would you expect some things to change? Maybe I'll start with Yansu. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Scott was probably much more better positioned to speak from a fleet perspective, but I mean, we kind of mentioned in the report that even for fleets that have done 2, 3, 4 facilities, which frankly, you're way out in front if you've done that many versus the industry. And still, even for those fleets, we're still at the very nascent early stages of electrification, right? I mean, 97, 98% of trucks are still diesel in our country. And I think I hope the industry really views this as a long-term project in itself with the electrification. And so, I would think that given the lead times, even on some of these utility upgrades and all those kind of things, that you got to take a long view and hopefully, relatively short-term impacts won't derail that kind of long-term vision that hopefully the industry has for
Yeah.
this.
Yep. Brian?
Yeah, if we look at this bar chart, I would expect that the bottom two items will grow and become kind of the most important pieces. We know there's going to be additional demands on the grid from data centers and AI, so that's only going to increase the challenges that we face with utility engagement to date. We know that TCO and ROI is going to be the focal point of fleets as they think about this from a business case perspective. I think the battery density technology and the pricing of vehicles is going to continue to come down somewhere between 10 and 15% year over year. And that is going to become kind of at parity and really help with the TCO and ROI. So I think more and more folks will be focusing on the business case behind these decisions, figuring out what specific vehicles at what specific depots can get to within, say, 10% of TCO parity, focusing on low-hanging fruit on a programmatic approach over the next 3 or 4 or 5 years before then expanding broadly. So that's kind of what we expect.
All right, Scott, you want to close this out?
Sure can close you out. And Ryan said it best. That's why I was looking at that chart. 74% of the total of the top four or the bottom four things, and Ryan just went through them. I don't see that changing. To the earlier comment, I couldn't agree more. I've heard so many people say, well, okay, I'm still in this journey. I felt a little rushed prior to this year. Now I can kind of take a breath, not delay, but take a breath and really understand this. So it's kind of that long putt, that long journey versus, rushing and making a decision that will later you have to redo or regret. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, guys. This was really helpful, and I think we used this report as an excuse to have a wonderful dialogue over the last 45 minutes. But anybody out there, do download the report, have a look at it. Contact any of us, Electrada, NACFE, and we would love to have a chat with you about what's in the report for both deeper understanding on all of our parts. So thanks for joining us, and have a great rest of your day. And thank you again, Scott and Yansu and Ryan.
Thanks, everyone.